walked into my kitchen, poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot I had just made, and said, without looking at me, "We need you to stop having your friends over on Saturdays. It's our only day to relax." Not a question, not a request, a sentence handed down like a ruling. I was standing right there, in my own kitchen. The one where I had canned tomatoes every August for 30 years, where I had taught my daughter to make biscuits from scratch, where I had sat alone after my husband passed and eaten soup I didn't taste and told myself I would be all right. I said nothing. I turned back to the sink and finished washing my mug. That was the first time I knew something had shifted in my own house. Not the last. My name is Winifred. I am 68 years old. I live, or I should say I own a 3-bedroom house in Savannah, Georgia. The back porch faces a row of old magnolia trees, and in the spring, when the windows are open, the whole house smells like something my mother would have approved of. I moved there with my late husband, Charles, in 1991. We raised our daughter, Renata, in that house. We painted the hallway twice and argued about the color both times. We grew old in that house, the way you do when you stay somewhere long enough, slowly, without noticing, and then all at once. Charles passed 6 years ago. Heart attack on a Tuesday morning in November. One moment he was complaining about the coffee being too weak, and then he was gone. Just like that. After that, the house was mine alone. And I learned, the way widows do, how to fill silence. I joined a book club. I kept a garden. I had my 2 friends, Paulette and June, though not the June in any story you've heard, over most Saturday afternoons. We would sit on that back porch, drink sweet tea or something stronger, and talk about everything and nothing until the light turned gold and we all went home feeling lighter than when we arrived. It was a small life, maybe, but it was mine. Every inch of it. Renata married her husband, Deshawn, 3 years after Charles passed. I liked him at first. He was charming the way some men are charming, easily and on purpose. He had a good job in commercial real estate, drove a nice car, laughed loud at his own jokes. Renata seemed happy, and that was what mattered to me. They had an apartment in Atlanta. They had a life. I visited a few times a year. They came to me for holidays, and things were fine in the careful, managed way things are fine when everyone is maintaining a certain distance. Then he lost the job. It wasn't sudden, or maybe it was, but the story kept changing. First it was a restructuring. Then it was a dispute with a supervisor. Then there was something about a licensing issue that I never fully understood and eventually stopped asking about. What I understood was this: the apartment in Atlanta was too expensive to keep. Renata's salary as a school administrator didn't cover it alone. And could they please stay with me for a little while, just until they got back on their feet? I said yes. I want to be honest about that. I said yes willingly, even gladly. Renata was my child. Whatever complicated feelings I had about Deshawn, she was my daughter and she needed help. And this house had 2 empty bedrooms and 1 woman rattling around in it. It seemed like the right thing to do. I should have written things down. I should have said, here are the terms, here is the timeline, here is what I expect. But I didn't, because she was my daughter, and it felt strange to hand your own child a document like she was a tenant. That was the first mistake. I understand that now. They moved in on a Saturday in March. It took most of the day. Deshawn had a lot of things. Furniture I had no room for that ended up in my garage. Boxes that stayed stacked in the corner of the guest room for months. A large television that he installed in a living room without asking. I told myself it was fine. I told myself it was an adjustment. The first few weeks were actually pleasant, in a way. Renata and I cooked together some evenings. We watched old movies. She thanked me every few days, genuinely, and I could see she was embarrassed by the situation even if she didn't say so directly. That helped. Deshawn was polite in those early weeks too. Or perhaps I should say, he was performing politeness, which is different. He said thank you when I made dinner. He asked about my day, but underneath it, and I am a woman who has lived 68 years and can feel the temperature of a room, there was something else, a restlessness, an impatience. Like a man waiting for a situation to become something he could be comfortable in. Within 2 months, the television in the living room had a permanent cable subscription in his name. Within 3, he was working from home, or said he was, and would close the living room door during the day so he could take calls. My living room, with the door I had hung in 1998, after Charles and I agreed on the hardware, a compromise that took 2 trips to the hardware store. I started spending more time in my bedroom, or in the garden, or on the back porch. Not because anyone told me to, but because a person learns to navigate around the shape of another person's comfort, and I did not want conflict in my own home. That was the second mistake. By the second year, things had changed in ways that were hard to point to individually, but unmistakable together. The Saturday afternoons with Paulette and June had been quietly relocated to the back porch, then reduced in frequency, then become a source of tension because, as Deshawn put it once, the noise traveled. He said it pleasantly. He was always pleasant about it. That was part of what made it so hard to argue against. He was never shouting, never cruel in any obvious way. He just stated things. Preferences that arrived in my house and took up residence without ever asking permission. He had started referring to the house differently, too. Our home was how we put it in conversation, when we have people over. In our house, we prefer. I noticed it each time and said nothing each time, and I think that silence was something he took careful inventory of. Renata worked long hours. She left early, came home tired. On weekends, she often had school paperwork spread across the dining room table. I think, in some ways, she had stopped seeing the smaller things. Or maybe she saw them and chose not to live directly at them, the way you don't live directly at the sun. I did not want to make her choose. That was always the fear, that if I said too much, I would be forcing her into a position that would damage something between us that could not be repaired. So I held my tongue. I adjusted my schedule. I cooked larger meals that he ate without comment. I learned the rhythm of his moods, the way you learn, the way a floorboard creaks, instinctively, automatically, so you can avoid making noise. 3 years passed this way. The evening it ended, or rather, the evening I decided it would end, started was nothing remarkable. I had come home from my doctor's appointment around 4 in the afternoon, later than I expected because the traffic on the way back from the office was bad. I had been waiting 3 weeks for this appointment, a follow-up about my blood pressure that had been running high for a few months. The doctor told me to reduce stress. She said it in that even clinical way doctors have, as if stress is something you can simply set aside like a bag you've been carrying. I came through the front door. I put down my purse on the entryway table, the small table with the curved legs that had belonged to my mother. I went to the kitchen and filled a glass of water and drank it slowly. Then I went to the living room to sit down. Deshawn was on the couch. He had the television on, a football pregame show at a volume I found uncomfortable but had learned not to mention. He was on his phone at the same time, scrolling with one hand, the other arm stretched out along the back of the couch in a posture of perfect ownership. He looked up when I walked in. Then he looked back at his phone. "We're having some guys over tonight," he said. "Kickoff's at 7. I figured you'd want to know so you could make yourself comfortable somewhere else." I stood there. I had just come from a medical appointment about my blood pressure. I was standing in the room where my husband and I had watched the news every evening for 17 years. I was 68 years old in my own house, and I was being informed that I should make myself comfortable somewhere else. "This is my living room," I said. He looked up again, and there was a flicker of something in his expression. Not anger exactly, more like irritation, the kind directed at something that is behaving unexpectedly. "I know that," he said. "I'm just saying it'll be loud. You probably won't enjoy it. I'm going to sit down now," I said. I walked to my chair. The armchair by the side window, the one I had reupholstered twice, and that had the reading lamp I positioned exactly right. And I sat down. He looked at me for a moment. Then he went back to his phone. But that was when something settled in me. Not rage. Not even hurt exactly. Something quieter. Something like a door closing, gently but with finality, somewhere deep inside. I sat in my chair for about 10 minutes. I listened to the television. I looked at the room, my walls, my bookshelves, my photographs, and I thought, clearly and without drama, that I had let this go on long enough. I got up, went to my bedroom, and called my friend Paulette. Paulette has known me for 31 years. We met when our children were in the same second-grade class, and we discovered, at a school fundraiser, that we had both brought the same peach cobbler. We have been friends ever since. The way women become friends when they have seen each other through enough hard years, that the friendship itself becomes a kind of testimony. Paulette listened to everything I told her. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Do you know a real estate attorney?" I said I didn't. She said she did. Her neighbor's son had just passed the bar and specialized in property law. His name was Marcus. And yes, I am aware of that coincidence, but it is his real name. She would give him a call the next morning if I wanted. I said yes. "You know you should have called me 2 years ago," she said, not unkindly. "I know," I said. "Are you going to tell Renata?" I thought about that for a while. "After," I said. "I'll tell her after." I met with Marcus 3 days later at a coffee shop not far from my house. He was younger than I expected, early 30s. Careful eyes, the kind of quiet confidence that good lawyers either have or learn to perform until it becomes genuine. He let me talk for 20 minutes without interrupting. Then he asked a few questions. Were they paying rent? No. Had there been any written agreement? No. Had they contributed to utilities or household expenses in any consistent way? Occasionally, but not reliably. How long had they been in the house? Just over 3 years. He explained the situation clearly. In Georgia, when someone lives in your home without a formal lease or rental agreement, they may still have certain rights as an occupant, meaning you cannot simply change the locks or demand they leave on a Tuesday afternoon. There is a process. It involves written notice, a waiting period, and if necessary, legal action. I had not known any of this. I had assumed my name on the deed was enough. Marcus explained gently that the deed established ownership, but occupancy rights were a separate matter. How long will this take? I asked. He said that if I issued a formal written notice to vacate, which, given the informal arrangement, he would recommend doing as an official legal document, and they complied within the notice period, it could be resolved relatively quickly. If they contested it, it would take longer. Do you think they'll contest it? He thought about it. Has your son-in-law given any indication he intends to stay long-term? I thought about the cable subscription in his name, the furniture in my garage, the way he said our home. Yes, I said. Marcus nodded. Then let's do this properly. I did not tell Renata before the notice was served. I want to explain that, because I know it sounds cold and I have thought about it many times since. The reason was not cruelty. The reason was that I had watched, for 3 years, what happened when I tried to raise issues directly. Renata would listen, look pained, say she would talk to him, and then nothing would change, or things would change briefly, and then quietly return to how they were. I think she was doing her best. I think she was caught between two people she did not want to hurt and had chosen, without fully realizing it, to protect the peace in a way that cost me more than it cost anyone else. If I told her what I was planning, she would tell him, and then there would be a conversation, probably several, and explanations and negotiations and promises, and I would find myself agreeing to some modified arrangement that solved nothing and only delayed the same conclusion by another year or two. I could not do that again. I did not have another year or two to spend on slow erosion, so I let the process move. The notice was delivered on a Wednesday morning. A formal document, legal letterhead, citing Georgia code, giving 30 days. I was not home when it was delivered. I was at Paulette's, sitting on her porch, with a cup of coffee, watching her put out bird feeders. Renata called me 20 minutes later. Her voice was shaking. Mom, what is this? It's a notice to vacate, I said. I had practiced staying calm. It means you have 30 days to find another place to live. Silence. Mom, did you hire a lawyer? I did. Why didn't you talk to me first? This was the hardest part. Not the legal process, not Deshawn's reaction, which I would hear about later. This. My daughter's voice, cracked open with confusion and hurt, asking me why I hadn't come to her first. I did talk to you, I said. I talked to you many times over 3 years. Things didn't change. She didn't say anything to that. I love you, I said. I am not asking you to choose between your husband and your mother. I am asking you both to find your own home. You are grown adults. You can do that. She cried. I let her. I didn't hang up, but I didn't take it back. Deshawn called me that evening. I did not answer. He called again the next morning. I did not answer. He sent a text message that was 3 paragraphs long and included the phrase, "After everything we've contributed to this household," which I read once and did not respond to. There was a week of silence after that. Then Renata called again, calmer. She said they had been looking at apartments. She asked if I would be willing to help them with the security deposit. I said I would think about it. I thought about it and I decided I would not. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I had already given 3 years of free housing, and I had learned that giving more before things were resolved did not make things more resolved. It just made them more comfortable. They were out in 24 days. They found an apartment in a suburb south of the city. It was smaller than what they were used to, Renata told me, but it was theirs. The day they moved the last of their things, Deshawn did not speak to me. He carried boxes past me without making eye contact, loaded the truck, and left. I stood in the doorway and watched the truck pull out of the driveway, and I felt, and I want to be precise about this, nothing I was ashamed of. A little sadness, a great deal of relief. The specific, physical relief of a pressure that has been released. After they left, I walked through the house slowly. I opened the windows in every room. I went to the living room and turned on the television and found the evening news and set the volume exactly where I like it. I sat in my chair by the side window, my chair, the one with the reading lamp, and I watched the light change outside, and I thought about Charles, briefly, the way I often do in quiet moments. I thought he would have handled things differently, and probably sooner. And I thought that too. And then I let it go. Renata and I did not speak for almost 2 months after that. It was the longest we had gone since she left for college, and I will not pretend it didn't hurt. It hurt the way a necessary thing can hurt, which is to say, fully, without apology, and without canceling itself out just because it was necessary. She called me on a Sunday afternoon in October. It was raining. I was reading on the back porch under the overhang, the way I like to when the weather's like that. And when I saw her name on the phone, I set my book face down on my knee and answered. She said she was sorry, not for the visit itself. I don't think she knew yet how to apologize for 3 years of small silences, but for how she had handled the call when the notice arrived, for what she had said in that first conversation, some of which she walked back slowly and some of which she just let sit there between us, named and undefended. I told her I accepted her apology. I told her I loved her. I told her I was proud of her, which I am. She is a good woman in the ways that matter, even when she is also a woman who avoids hard things when she can. She asked if she could come for dinner the following Sunday. Alone. I said yes. She came. We cooked together. We talked about a lot of things and avoided a few others, the way families do when they are finding their way back to each other carefully. Deshawn's name came up once. She said things were better, that having their own space had changed something. She said it neutrally, not as a concession, but I heard what was underneath it. I did not say I told you so. I thought about saying it. I did not. I still have my Saturday afternoons with Paulette and sometimes June, back on the back porch where they belong, with the sweet tea and the long conversations that end when the light goes gold. I changed the locks after they left. I know that sounds like a small detail, but it mattered to me. A locksmith came on a Tuesday and replaced every lock in the house, and when he handed me the new keys, 3 of them on a plain metal ring, I held them for a moment and thought, this is mine, all of it. It always was. I think about what I would tell someone in the situation I was in 3 years ago when they first moved in, and I knew, somewhere underneath the willingness, that I had not set the terms I needed to set. I would tell them, generosity is not the same as open-endedness. Loving your family does not mean having no walls. The most loving thing you can do sometimes is be clear about what is yours, about what you need, about what you will and will not live with inside your own home. I would also tell them it is not too late. Whatever year it is, whatever has already accumulated, it is not too late to pick up the phone and call someone who knows the law. The process is slower than you would like and harder than it should be, but it exists for a reason. You do not have to shout. You do not have to threaten. You just have to decide, and then let the paperwork do what paperwork does. I was a woman who spent 3 years moving smaller and smaller inside my own house, stepping around someone else's comfort, going quiet so no one would have to deal with my noise. I am not that woman anymore. The magnolias bloomed again this spring. I sat on the back porch and watched them, alone, with the volume exactly as loud as I wanted it. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. I think about the chair a lot, not as a symbol, just the actual chair, the worn armrest, the lamp I angled just right over 30 years of evenings. How I had started sitting in it less and less, then almost not at all, as though I had quietly agreed to become a guest in my own house without anyone ever asking me to sign anything. That is how it happens. Not with one loud moment, but with 100 small ones. A comment you absorb, a preference you defer to, a Saturday afternoon you relocate. None of it, taken alone, seems worth the fight. Taken together, it becomes the shape of your life, smaller, quieter, arranged around someone else's comfort. What I understand now that I did not understand 3 years ago is that how we allow ourselves to be treated is something we teach, whether we mean to or not. I am not saying this to blame myself. I am saying it because it is true, and truth is more useful than comfort. Deshawn did not arrive at my door already knowing he could tell me to make myself comfortable somewhere else. He learned it from my silence, from my adjustments, from the way I folded myself smaller every time he expanded. I handed in that knowledge, one quiet concession at a time, knowing that is not the same as guilt. It is the beginning of something better. What took me so long was not weakness. I want to be clear about that. It was love, an honest, complicated love for my daughter that made me afraid to draw a line she might have to choose a side of. That fear is real. It costs something to act on what you know is right when the cost might be paid by a relationship you cannot replace. It takes a kind of moral clarity to say, I will do the right thing even if the short-term consequence is pain. Not righteous clarity. The quiet, hard-earned kind. The kind that only comes from sitting with a problem long enough that you stop hoping it will solve itself. And then there is what came after. The calls I did not return. The text I read once and put down. The 2 months of silence from Renata that I will not pretend did not hurt. Getting to the other side of that required something I can only describe as the refusal to be undone. Not stubbornness. Not coldness. Just a steady decision, renewed each morning, that I had done the right thing and I would not walk it back because it was uncomfortable, that the discomfort itself was part of the process, not evidence that I had made a mistake. Renata called in October. We found our way back to each other, slowly. The way you find your way back after something real has shifted between two people. It is not the same as before. I think it is better, more honest, built on something more solid than the careful avoidance of hard things. I changed the locks on a Tuesday. 3 keys on a plain metal ring. I held them and thought, I should have done this sooner. Then I thought, I did it when I was ready. Both of those things are true. If there is anything I would want someone to take from what happened to me, it is this. Not a formula, just something I know now that I did not know then. Your home is not just a building. It is the space where you are allowed to be fully yourself, to take up the room that belongs to you, to set the volume where you like it. When that space is taken from you quietly, over time, the work of reclaiming it is not dramatic. It is paperwork and phone calls and one steady decision after another. It is knowing what is yours and being willing to say so, not with anger, but with the quiet, unshakable certainty of someone who has finally stopped waiting for permission. The magnolias bloomed again this spring. I watched them from the back porch, alone, in the good kind of silence.